Welcome to Building a Strong Team Response for High-Risk and Trafficked Youth. In this session, you will be guided through strategies to implement in your own practice, as well as specific action steps relevant to all members of a youth's multidisciplinary or care team. My name is Rebecca Detman, and I serve as the Anti-Human Trafficking Coordinator at the Milwaukee Child Advocacy Center and for DCF Region 3. In early 2020, Claudine O'Leary and I began work on a set of tools intended to support both youth and their workers in boosting protective capacities. To learn more about the companion tool, please search for the Finding Your Strengths recording. Before jumping into the tool, it's important to understand the context. Through professional experience and educational training, people in direct practice are accustomed to a strengths-based approach when working with clients. While this holds true with the high-risk and CSEC population, we know from our own experiences and from supporting multidisciplinary teams that maintaining strengths is much easier said than done. In response, we set out to create a tool for youth workers that encompasses tangible, realistic ideas and steps workers can take to recognize positive changes in a young person's life, as well as discover new opportunities to partner with that young person in the process. An assumption throughout the development phase was that youth are always facing a continuum of risk. This could be individual risk, such as prior abuse, relationship risk, like family conflict, or even community risk, like their neighborhood. And within all these types of risk, there's fluidity based on past, present, and future circumstances. We also approached with the understanding that many youth are already taking steps to protect themselves in ways that we don't even realize, and we need ways to affirm that. Lastly, it is our belief that youth deserve and need effective adult support in their lives. However, we recognize that adults are needing support too, and that's exactly what this tool aims to do. See the right side of the slide for our process and development timeline. In print form, building a strong team response to high-risk and trafficked youth is a two-sided on a single page. You may also choose to think of it as a desk guide, since it is not the type of tool that gives direction based on a response. Rather, this tool, or guide, provides practical content and ideas for action steps on the part of the youth worker. Side 1 is broken down into 3 primary sections: key framework, anticipation of resource needs, and a refresher on the following skills and strategies: engagement, offering options, and use of affirming language. Side 2 follows the stages of readiness model. Different from stages of change, the goal here is to meet youth where they're at. Stages of readiness may look fluid, and readiness may also vary across different life domains. For example, a young person may begin showing readiness for appointments regarding their physical health, but not ready to address their mental health. And while you may observe forward movement using this guide, it's important to note that an intervention may begin as small or as simple as incorporating or even attempting one of the engagement skills from side 1. In the PDF format or hard copies, you'll notice some bolded terms that match up to the practice strategies from side 1. Again, those are engagement, options, and affirming language. Here are some tips for getting started. As we review the tool section by section, think about times in your own cases when you or a team you were part of felt stuck or unsure how to proceed with a youth in a difficult situation. Also consider how this tool could help maintain momentum with a youth who's already making strides towards change or a particular goal. Know that this is something you can read over to prepare for a team meeting or to prepare for more official things like a court hearing. Keep in mind that this is a complement to other tools, and though we do believe it can give you new ideas on how to fill in parts of existing child welfare and youth justice assessments, it is not a replacement. Last, come back to it as often as serves you and the young person you are working with. We start with our key framework. If you are newer to this population or are feeling at a standstill in a current case, this is for you. Before anything else, become familiar with the concepts on this panel, like bringing your most genuine self to interactions with youth, showing up without judgment, having openness to options and choices, and shifting to a harm reduction approach. The top panel serves for resource awareness. In order to reduce and respond to risk, it is necessary to understand risk. The Wisconsin Indicator and Response Guide is intended for the purpose of guiding mandatory reports, but it can also be a helpful tool when considering the totality of one's risk. Qualitative interviews in the literature indicate that it is not uncommon for a youth to define their most pressing need or most traumatic experience as something different than how the adults in their lives might expect it to be. And for this reason, we encourage you to think about trauma and needs both within and outside the scope of exploitation. Next, become familiar with resources in your area and how you will help youth access them. In Wisconsin, this could look like utilizing 211. There are also teen resource cards available for several counties in central and eastern Wisconsin. The example pictured is made available to youth in Milwaukee. Next, we move into the 3 skills boxes, the first being engagement. A foundation of direct practice, engagement continually comes up in the research literature as one of the most important and effective interventions with high risk and trafficked youth. Young people in Wisconsin-based focus groups specifically recommended things like offering simple forms of personal connection, getting to know them as a person who's separate from their case file, and spending quality time together. This could be anything from giving them a ride to taking them out to eat, or even introducing them to a new experience. Presenting options and doing so tactfully is another opportunity to enhance engagement. On the guide, we've listed a range of ideas from concrete day-to-day options all the way to incorporating youth preference into larger decisions. The last box provides sample statements of affirming language. The phrasing is consistent with motivational interviewing and demonstrates what may feel like truly affirming statements. You showed commitment by coming here today, or it's really great to see you. Thanks for stopping by, as well as strategies to identify opportunities for affirmation in more complicated situations, such as when youth experiences a setback. Over and over, youth indicate that adults who give consistent praise and acknowledgement for small, simple strides are adults whom they are more likely to connect with. Consider this. A youth not receiving affirmation from a safe and trusted adult will likely still seek affirmation, but from someone less safe. Moving on to the backside, we'll move into what to expect in the stages of readiness framework. Something unique about this tool is that it actually starts with engagement before a youth is responsive to the adults in their lives. And this comes directly from experiences in our own practice, as well as feedback we heard from youth workers, indicating workers felt this added layer of challenge when working with disengaged youth, but also recognizing this to be a time when youth were really needing adult support the most. Something else we heard was that many times when youth pulled away, so would their team members. The message reinforced in box 1 is that youth workers should not use this as downtime or as a break. Instead, see it as a time to regroup as a team of formal and informal supports. This could look like working together to understand who is part of the care team, figure out what each person's responsibilities are, figure out if there's a team member or other safe individual who the youth has historically been more receptive to, and what is it about that person that the youth is drawn to or makes them feel more comfortable. This is also a time to shift to a harm reduction approach rather than focusing on pushing youth into higher levels of programming and intervention than they are ready for. Maybe you've been in a scenario like this. You're working with a teen who you suspect is being exploited based on a variety of risk factors and indicators. They've been missing from placement on and off for weeks, and from time to time, they'll pop up at a relative's home for a night or to shower, but mostly just fly under the radar. And because they're duly involved in youth justice, there's also a capias. One random Monday, they show up in the social work office at the school where they were last enrolled. Without prep and continued team connection during their period of absence, there's an increased likelihood of a very chaotic response to this situation. Alternatively, a strong team may have done some prep work in advance. It may have been something like the youth justice worker communicating back to team members what will likely happen if the youth is intercepted by law enforcement as a missing. The school social worker can ask questions about their responsibility to report back to the team or to notify law enforcement if the youth shows up at school. A team member or an informal support can be designated to help connect the youth to the public defender's office, and different plans can be laid out in advance pending the flexibility of the capias, such as if it can be cleared without taking the youth into custody, and if the youth has the right to an advocate before engaging with police. Or if indeed there's no other option and the youth must be taken into custody, what is the least traumatic and most private way for them to exit the school building? In summary, Box 1 is completely reliant on adult teamwork in the absence of the youth. Next, Boxes 2 and 3 outline specific actions youth workers can take to promote an increased level of response from youth. Literature and other youth-informed reports tell us that simply making more efforts to get in contact, keeping the door open for youth to respond, reducing judgment towards how youth meet their physical and emotional needs, and demonstrating warmth in all interactions are effective interventions in this very early phase. Another point we stress in this area of readiness is that simply by being in Box 2 or 3, you can already assume some type of forward movement or minimal level of engagement. If we are looking at this as a progression, it only makes sense to expect a sometimes response before an always response. Think of it like this. A young person who responds to your texts or answers the phone some of the time, even if they are not staying in an approved placement or making themselves physically available, is different than a young person who does not respond at all. Response or independent outreach are choices they have made, choices they may not have made at a different period in time. That alone is the point you can affirm to youth in this stage of readiness. Moving on to Box 4, this is where we would see our ideal situation. A young person who exhibits actions consistent with Box 4 is entering a stage of readiness that is beginning to shape into a stage of change. Please note that this occurs more than halfway through our guide if we are looking at it as a forward progression, meaning a lot of pre-work has likely occurred before a youth lands here. Also be aware that as youth contemplate participation in structured programming and treatment, you may also encounter ambivalence that could hold them back from the next stage. Ambivalence is often related to very real, very serious internal and external factors, such as the way youth perceive safety, their security, their needs for attention and affection, familiarity with the ways they've been surviving, and perhaps even feeling loss of independence. These factors will likely need to be confronted therapeutically or very intentionally explored with a team member whom they feel safest to have these conversations. Finally, Boxes 5 and 6 demonstrate a youth who is now active in the change process and making a conscious decision to distance or begin distancing themselves from an exploitive person or situation. A key takeaway from Box 5 is that although this may feel like a very natural time to take a step back and allow the youth to embrace their success, it is critically important to continue standing by them as it's an equally vulnerable time for setbacks. Another scenario where you may observe elements of box 5 could be youth who are going through a honeymoon phase in a new placement or have some other abrupt change that pulls them away from the life. Similarly, consider any potential honeymoon phase as highly vulnerable and requiring consistent adult presence. As a team, we will want to start planning for and normalizing the possibility of a setback around this same time. You might choose to do so by sharing facts or data about the prevalence of relapse, and by letting them know that no matter what happens, you are going to be there for them and will continue supporting them in achieving their goals. Team members in positions with historically high turnover or in time-limited roles should appreciate the need for warm handoffs as teams evolve and other transitions occur in young adulthood. A 14-year-old, for example, will have different vulnerabilities, different support options, and different experiences of setbacks over the next 5 years than someone who is 17. Both still have a long road ahead. Both still need people to support them in that journey. To wrap up, let's look at some practical applications of the Building a Strong Team Response to High-Risk and Trafficked Youth tool. Aside from the ways in which you may find the content educational or informative, here are some other things you might consider when incorporating it into practice. First, targeted case planning. Use this tool to help you more concretely understand where youth are in their state of readiness, and based on that, determine what steps you might be able to take or delegate to continue increasing engagement. Furthermore, the tool is here to start a conversation. This can occur among team members, between a worker and supervisor, or spark ideas for your next interaction with a young client. The tool provides you with options and perspective for how you may approach a situation differently than you would have before. And lastly, you may choose to use the tool as a supplement to other assessments you are already doing or reports you are already writing. For example, it can be challenging to enter a court hearing regarding a youth who is, at face level, very disconnected, not engaged in services. Referencing this tool or using it to inspire your update can help articulate the work being done among team members behind the scenes to support a youth, or attempts that you might be making, even when they're currently unavailable. You can use it to articulate what you plan to do moving forward to increase the points of connection. Remember, as referenced before, a youth who sometimes shows up is very different than a youth who does not, and that is something to be affirmed. If you'd like to learn more, find out how to access a more in-depth version of the user training, or stay connected for other related presentations, please utilize the contact information listed. A PDF version of the tool, along with the companion worksheet called Finding Your Strengths, are available for download on the Wisconsin DCF Anti-Human Trafficking website. Hard copies, including laminated pages of the tool, may be available on request. Thank you for your interest in learning new ways to support high-risk and trafficked youth.